I never knew exactly what my heartbeat sounded like until it was the only thing I could hear. Standing frozen in the hallway, hand still on the door handle, I felt it pounding in my ears like a hammer against glass. Once she delivers, we'll let her go. My boss's voice, unmistakable through the crack in the conference room door. Then a deeper voice, our CEO, Richard, chuckling like he'd just heard a good joke instead of plans to destroy someone's life. After she saves us that $12.4 million contract. My work, my 18-hour days for the past 6 months. My name is Allison Reeves, and I'm 34 years old. Before I go further, please like this video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I honestly read every comment and would love to connect with you. Because what I'm about to share isn't just a story. It's the moment my entire understanding of loyalty and professional worth collapsed, and what I chose to do about it. I'd been with Pinnacle Solutions for 7 years. Not some fancy tech startup with ping-pong tables and cold brew on tap. Just a mid-sized consulting firm where I'd climbed from junior analyst to head project manager through nothing but relentless work and sacrifice. The Miller Project was supposed to be my crowning achievement, saving a $12.4 million contract that 3 senior managers had already failed to deliver on. The night I overheard them, I'd come back after dinner because I couldn't sleep anyway. My apartment had felt too quiet lately. 3 months before, my fiancé Michael had finally had enough of my dedication to the job and moved out, taking even the potted plants I'd never had time to water. "You're married to that company, Allison," he'd said, standing in the doorway with his last box. "I hope they love you back." They didn't. I should have slammed that conference room door open right then. Should have confronted them. Instead, I silently backed away, returned to my desk, and stared at my laptop screen until the words blurred. Then, with hands that wouldn't stop trembling, I kept working. That's what good girls do, right? What professional women do. We swallow the betrayal, process the hurt on our own time. 7 years of being the reliable one, the Allison will handle it woman, and this was my reward. I drove home at 1 a.m. with tears streaming down my face, mascara probably making me look like some tragic raccoon. But by morning, something had shifted inside me. The hurt had hardened into something else. Something with edges. The Miller Project wasn't just any contract. It represented exclusive rights to develop software for 3 of the largest hospitals in our region. The previous project managers, all men with MBA degrees from schools they never failed to mention, had bungled the requirements gathering, promised impossible features, and created a mess of code that barely functioned. The client, Westridge Health Group, was ready to walk. That's when my boss, Nathan Cooper, had called me into his office with that fake concerned look on his face. "Allison, you're the only one who can salvage this," he'd said, both hands pressed against his desk like he was physically transferring the burden. "Your attention to detail, your relationship skills. We need you." And God help me, I'd felt proud, special, chosen. What I didn't know then was that I wasn't chosen for my skills. I was chosen because I was expendable. The next morning after the overheard conversation, I arrived at work earlier than usual. My eyes were swollen despite the cucumber slices and cold spoons I'd pressed against them at 5 a.m. I wore my sharpest blazer, the navy one with structured shoulders that always made me feel like I was wearing armor. Nathan was already there, which was unusual. He smiled when he saw me, and I watched that smile with new eyes. How had I never noticed how it never quite reached his eyes? "Allison, just the woman I wanted to see. How's progress on Miller looking?" My throat felt tight, like I might either scream or throw up. Instead, I smiled back. "On track. The development team has corrected the integration issues from yesterday. I'm meeting with the client tomorrow for the interim review." "That's my girl," he said, patting my shoulder as he walked past. My girl, like I was a golden retriever who'd fetched the newspaper. I went through that day in a fog, nodding in meetings, answering emails, all while a voice in my head kept repeating the same phrase. Let her handle it, then fire her. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I sat in my living room, surrounded by the sparse furniture Michael had left behind, and really looked at my life for the first time in years. The promotion I'd been angling for, the corner office, the retirement plan I was building, all of it based on the belief that hard work would be rewarded, that loyalty mattered. What a joke. I opened my laptop and started looking at my options. I could quit immediately satisfying, but financially devastating. I could half-ass the project and watch it fail, but that would hurt my professional reputation more than theirs. Or I could do what I always did: excel, deliver, and then be discarded. Unless. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. There was a fourth option. I could deliver exactly what they asked for and make sure I was the only one who understood exactly how I'd done it. The next 2 weeks were the most intense of my professional life. I slept maybe 4 hours a night. I stopped by the office gym just enough to maintain appearances, but every spare minute was dedicated to 2 parallel tracks: saving the Miller project and documenting everything. Nathan checked in daily, his friendly concern growing as the deadline approached. "You're working too hard, Allison," he'd say, leaning against my cubicle wall. "We appreciate the dedication, but take care of yourself." The fake concern made my skin crawl, but I'd smile and nod. "Almost there, just want to make sure it's perfect." "That's why we need you on this," he'd say. And each time, I recorded the conversation on my phone, which sat face down on my desk. I also started talking more with Sarah from legal, who'd always been friendly but distant, the kind of work acquaintance you exchange pleasantries with but never really know. Over lunch one day, I carefully steered our conversation toward employment contracts and terminations. "It's funny," she said, picking at her salad, "how many managers don't understand the concept of constructive dismissal or how detailed our documentation needs to be for clean terminations." "What do you mean?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. She leaned forward. "Between us, HR is always cleaning up after executives who think they can just fire people on a whim. There are protocols, especially for employees with your tenure." That night, I reviewed my employment contract with new eyes: the intellectual property clauses, the non-compete agreement, the termination procedures. I started making notes. The Miller project itself was coming together beautifully. I'd redesigned the workflow, simplified the interface, and created detailed documentation for every component. But I built it all around my own system, one that looked straightforward but had nuances only I fully understood. 10 days after overhearing my planned firing, I was presenting progress to Richard, our CEO, and Nathan. Richard rarely attended these meetings, but with $12.4 million on the line, he'd suddenly developed an interest in the details. "The client is thrilled with the new direction," I explained, clicking through slides that showed dramatic improvements in system performance. "We've corrected the fundamental flaws in the original architecture." "Excellent work, Allison," Richard said, not really looking at me but at the numbers on the screen. "I knew you were the right person for this job. The right person to use and discard." I smiled so hard my cheeks hurt. "The next phase is critical," I continued. "We need to finalize the security protocols and complete user acceptance testing. I've prepared a detailed timeline." I handed them each a folder with printouts deliberately overwhelming, filled with technical specifications and project planning documents. Buried in the middle was page 17, a critical document outlining my unique implementation methodology. Neither of them would read it carefully. They never did. That night, I backed up everything to my personal cloud storage. Every email, every specification document, every piece of code I'd written or revised. Not to steal, I'm not a thief, but to protect myself with evidence of exactly what I'd contributed. 4 days before the final deadline, the Westridge Health Group executives requested an in-person meeting to review the final product before sign-off. This was standard procedure, but Nathan seemed unusually nervous. "It has to be perfect, Allison," he said, pacing my cubicle. "Richard will be there. The entire board will be watching this." "I understand," I said calmly. "Everything is on track." He hesitated. "I've added Jason to the presentation team just as backup." Jason, a junior developer who had contributed nothing to the project's recovery. I knew immediately what this meant. My replacement was already being positioned. "Great," I said, my voice steady while my stomach twisted. "He can handle the technical questions during the demonstration." That night, I made my final preparations. I reviewed the board meeting agenda Sarah had casually left visible on her desk when I'd stopped by with a coffee question. I confirmed the timing, the attendees, the meeting room setup. I finalized my presentation materials, sent the required copies to the executive assistant, and then did something I'd never done before in my professional life. I left work at 5 p.m. The guard at the front desk actually did a double take. "Early day, Ms. Reeves?" I smiled. "Big day tomorrow. Need to be fresh." At home, I laid out my outfit for the board meeting. Not my usual conservative suit, but a red dress I'd bought for a wedding and never worn. Bold, confident, memorable. Then I rehearsed what I would say, how I would stand, the exact timing of each reveal. Sleep came easily for the first time in weeks. I'd done everything possible to prepare. The rest would happen in that boardroom. The morning of the presentation dawned bright and clear. I arrived at the office early, but not as early as usual. Nathan was already texting me. "Where are you? We need to prep." I took my time responding, applying my lipstick carefully in my car's mirror. For 7 years, I jumped at every message, responded within seconds. Not today. When I walked into the office carrying a sleek portfolio instead of my usual overstuffed bag, I felt people noticing the difference. The red dress, the confidence in my walk, something had shifted. Nathan was waiting by my desk, checking his watch. "There you are," he said, relief and irritation battling in his voice. "We need to go over the slides one more time. I've made some adjustments to your presentation." I set down my things calmly. "What adjustments?" He slid a USB drive across my desk. "Just a few tweaks to the messaging. And I've added Jason to the first 3 slides as project co-lead." Co-lead. For someone who'd attended exactly 2 meetings and contributed nothing. I picked up the drive and smiled. "I'll take a look." "Now please," he said, the friendly facade slipping. "We present in 2 hours." "I understand," I replied. "I just need to check something with Sarah in legal first. Contract language the client requested. I'll be right back." Before he could object, I walked away, the USB drive in my hand, but I didn't go to legal. Instead, I went to the small conference room I'd booked yesterday, locked the door, and plugged the drive into my laptop. As expected, Nathan had completely reworked my presentation. My name was minimized, Jason's was prominent, and the technical details, the ones that explained exactly how I'd saved the project, were simplified to the point of meaninglessness. I deleted the file, replaced it with my original presentation, and added 1 new slide at the end. Then I headed to the executive boardroom floor, arriving 30 minutes before the scheduled meeting time. The catering staff was still setting up coffee and pastries. I helped them arrange things, making casual conversation, positioning myself as someone who belonged there. When the AV technician arrived to test the system, I introduced myself as the lead presenter and asked to check my slides. "Of course, Ms. Reeves. The system is ready whenever you are." I uploaded my presentation, confirmed everything worked properly, and then sat in a chair in the corner, reviewing my notes while executives and board members gradually filtered in. Nathan arrived 15 minutes before the start time, looking increasingly panicked when he couldn't find me. When he finally spotted me already in the boardroom, his eyes widened. "Allison, I've been looking everywhere for you. Did you review the updated slides?" I nodded, my face serene. "Everything's ready to go, Nathan. The presentation is loaded and tested." Relief washed over his face. "Perfect. The Westridge team just arrived. They're in the lobby." As he turned to leave, I added, "Oh, and Nathan? I kept your changes to a minimum. I think my original version conveys the technical achievement more accurately." He froze, then turned back slowly. "What does that mean? I need to see the slides now." "They're already loaded in the system," I said, gesturing to the AV setup. "No time to change them now. The board is arriving." The boardroom filled quickly. Richard, our CEO, made his entrance last, flanked by 2 Westridge Health Group executives. I recognized Dr. CEO, Eleanor Miller herself, the woman whose family name was on our contract, whose hospitals would be using our system. She wasn't just a client. She was the decision maker who controlled that $12.4 million. I straightened my spine, feeling the red fabric of my dress against my skin. For 7 years, I'd worn muted colors, played the part of the reliable background player. Today, I was choosing visibility. Nathan was sweating now, casting nervous glances between me and the presentation screen. Jason arrived, looking confused when he saw me already seated near the presenter's position. Richard began the introductions, his voice booming with practiced authority. "We're delighted to present the completed Miller project today," he said, gesturing broadly. "Our team, led by Nathan Cooper, has transformed the original concept into a state-of-the-art hospital management system that will revolutionize your operations." Not a single mention of my name, I wasn't surprised. "Nathan, why don't you take it from here?" Richard said, settling into his chair at the head of the table. Nathan stood, buttoning his jacket with slightly trembling fingers. "Thank you, Richard. We're extremely proud of what we've accomplished. I'd like to introduce Allison Reeves, who has assisted with the project implementation, and Jason Mercer, who has been instrumental in the technical architecture. Assisted, after 6 months of 18-hour days, after saving what 3 men had destroyed." I stood, smiled warmly, and moved to the presenter's position before either Nathan or Jason could reach it. "Thank you, Nathan. Good morning, everyone. I'm excited to show you how we've not only salvaged but revolutionized the Miller project." I clicked to the first slide, my original slide, with my name clearly listed as project lead. Nathan's face tightened. But what could he do? Wrestle the clicker from my hand in front of the board and our most important client? For the next 20 minutes, I walked through every aspect of the project with confident precision. I explained how I'd identified the fundamental flaws in the original architecture, redesigned the workflow patterns, and created an intuitive interface that the hospital staff could learn in half the time originally estimated. The key innovation, I continued, clicking to slide 15, was recognizing that the previous approach violated 3 core principles of healthcare information systems. I outlined each one, watching Dr. Miller nod with increasing enthusiasm. Nathan tried to interject twice, but I smoothly acknowledged his points and continued, never surrendering control of the presentation. Jason, to his credit, looked increasingly uncomfortable, clearly aware he was being positioned for work he hadn't done. "What about the security concerns our IT director raised last month?" Dr. Miller asked, her first direct question. Nathan started to answer, but I spoke first. "An excellent question. If you'll turn to page 17 in your packets." I paused as everyone shuffled through their materials to find the document I'd buried there. The one I knew Nathan and Richard hadn't read. "You'll see our comprehensive security protocol, which exceeds industry standards in 3 critical areas." I walked them through it, watching Dr. Miller's expression shift from skepticism to approval. By the time I clicked to the final slides, the energy in the room had transformed. The board members were leaning forward. The Westridge executives were exchanging impressed glances. "In conclusion," I said, "we've delivered a system that not only meets your original requirements, but enhances operational efficiency by an estimated 34% over your current processes." The implementation timeline on page 23 shows we're ready to begin rollout next week, with full deployment completed 2 weeks ahead of schedule. Applause broke out, actual applause, from the Westridge team. Richard was beaming now, $signs practically visible in his eyes. Nathan was attempting to look proud, while simultaneously looking like he might vomit. "Any questions?" I asked, standing tall in my red dress. Dr. Miller spoke up. "Just one. This is impressive work, Ms. Reeves. I'd like you to personally oversee the implementation at our flagship hospital." Before Richard or Nathan could respond, I smiled directly at her. "I'd be honored, Dr. Miller. However, there's something I should address first." I clicked to the final slide, the one I'd added last night, the one neither Nathan nor Richard had seen. On the screen appeared a simple statement: "Project continuity concerns." The room went silent. "What's this?" Richard asked, his smile faltering. "A critical consideration for the success of this project," I said calmly. "As the sole architect of the revised system, I've created detailed documentation for every component. However, there are nuances to the implementation that only I fully understand at this point. Nathan's face had gone from red to white. He knew what was coming. I recently learned, I continued, my voice steady despite my pounding heart, that Pinnacle planned to remove me from the project immediately after today's presentation. Before the actual implementation, before the training, before ensuring the system functions as promised. Richard stood abruptly. This is hardly the time or place. I disagree, I said, not raising my voice, but not backing down. This is exactly the time and place, because it directly impacts Westridge's $12.4 million investment. Dr. Miller's eyes narrowed. What exactly are you saying, Ms. Reeves? I turned to face her directly. I'm saying that 10 days ago, I overheard Nathan and Richard discussing plans to terminate my employment once I had saved your contract. Their exact words were, let her handle it, then fire her. The boardroom erupted in murmurs. Dr. Miller's expression hardened as she looked between Richard and Nathan. Is this true? She asked them. Nathan stepped forward. Allison is obviously misinterpreting something she thinks she heard. I have the recording, I said quietly, pulling my phone from my portfolio. Would you like me to play it? The blood drained from both men's faces. I hadn't been recording in the office that night. I'd been in the hallway, but they didn't know that. What they did know was that I'd been recording our recent conversations, and there was enough damning evidence there to make them uncertain. Dr. Miller turned to Richard. I find this disturbing, to say the least. We're entrusting our entire hospital network to this system. Continuity of expertise is non-negotiable. Richard tried to recover. Dr. Miller, I assure you, there's been a misunderstanding. Allison is a valued team member. We had been discussing restructuring, yes, but restructuring that coincidentally was scheduled for immediately after I delivered this project? I interjected. After working nights and weekends for 6 months to fix the mess your previous project managers created? Dr. Miller stood. I've heard enough. Mr. Harrington, our contract explicitly requires stable project leadership through implementation and the first year of operation. If Ms. Reeves created this system, then she needs to oversee its implementation. I let the moment hang there, watching Richard's mental calculations, the $12.4 million contract versus whatever he'd planned for me. Of course, he finally said, his businessman smile returning. Allison is essential to the project. There was never any intention of removing her. I turned back to the screen and clicked to a new slide I'd prepared, one showing the implementation schedule with my name clearly indicated as lead on every phase. Then you'll have no objection to formalizing my role in the updated contract, with guaranteed continuity for the full project lifecycle. It wasn't a question. Dr. Miller nodded approvingly. I insist on it, actually, and I'd like that addendum drafted today. The meeting wrapped up shortly after, with handshakes and forced smiles. As the room emptied, Richard gripped my elbow, his fingers digging in just slightly too hard. My office. Now, he hissed. I smiled pleasantly. Of course. Right after I finish answering Dr. Miller's questions about the implementation timeline, I spent the next 20 minutes with the Westridge team, discussing details and building rapport. When I finally made my way to Richard's office, both he and Nathan were waiting, faces like thunderclouds. What the hell was that? Richard demanded the moment I closed the door. I remained standing. That was me ensuring project continuity for our most important client. You ambushed us in front of the board, Nathan said, voice shaking with anger. You had no right. I had every right, I countered, my voice level but firm. You were planning to fire me after I saved your contract. After I fixed the mess 3 men with corner offices created. I simply made sure our client understood what that would mean for their investment. Richard leaned forward, his expression calculating now. What do you want, Allison? A raise? A promotion? Name it. The question caught me off guard. I had expected rage, threats, maybe immediate termination despite the scene it would cause, not negotiation. For a moment, I considered what I did want. The director position I'd been angling for, a corner office with my name on the door. But standing there in my red dress, I suddenly realized those things belonged to the old Allison, the one who believed in the system, who thought loyalty would be rewarded with loyalty. I want 3 things, I said finally. First, The lead role on the Miller Project implementation, fully documented and contracted, with a completion bonus equal to 5% of the contract value. Richard's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Second, I want a formal retraction of any termination plans, with Sarah from legal present as witness. Nathan started to protest, but Richard cut him off. Fine. Third, I continued, feeling a strange calm now. Once the Miller Project is successfully implemented and the first quarterly review completed, I want a clean departure from Pinnacle. A generous severance package, excellent references, and no non-compete restrictions. They both stared at me, confused. You want to leave? Nathan asked. After fighting to stay? I looked at him directly. I'm not fighting to stay. I'm fighting for the respect and recognition I've earned. There's a difference. Richard studied me with new eyes. You could have a future here, Allison. Today showed what you're capable of. Today showed what you're capable of too, I replied. And that's not something I can unknow. The aftermath was surprisingly quiet. Word spread through the office. Of course, whispers about how I'd outmaneuvered the executive team, secured my position on the biggest contract in company history, and somehow extracted concessions no one had seen Richard Harrington give before. Sarah from legal called me that afternoon. I just drafted the strangest contract addendum of my career, she said, sounding impressed. Congratulations, I think? Thank you, I said. For that, and for the casual information about termination protocols. She laughed softly. I might have noticed some concerning conversations. Professional women need to look out for each other. The next 6 months were intense but rewarding. I led the Miller Project implementation with complete authority. Nathan was mysteriously reassigned to another division. Richard treated me with a wary respect that never warmed into anything genuine, but I didn't need his approval anymore. The system rolled out smoothly across all 3 hospitals. Staff training went better than projected. Dr. Miller herself called me the most effective project manager she'd ever worked with during the final review meeting. When I submitted my resignation letter exactly 1 day after that review, Richard didn't seem surprised. He simply slid a folder across his desk with the severance terms we'd negotiated generous, as promised. You could have ruined us that day in the boardroom, he said as I reviewed the documents. Why didn't you? I looked up from the papers. Because this wasn't about ruining you. It was about valuing myself. My last day was quiet. I packed my few personal items, said goodbyes to the colleagues who'd become friends. As I walked to the elevator for the final time, Sarah from legal caught up with me. So where are you going next? She asked. I smiled. Dr. Miller offered me a position heading technology implementation across their entire hospital network. Double the salary, equity options, and a team I get to build myself. Sarah's eyes widened. You're going to work directly for the client? Can you do that? Check the revised contract language, I said, stepping into the elevator. No non-compete restrictions. I made sure of it. As the doors closed on Pinnacle Solutions for the last time, I felt neither triumph nor regret, just a quiet certainty that I would never again let anyone determine my worth but me. 2 months into my new role at Westridge Health Group, I received an email from Jason, my supposed co-lead from the Miller Project. The subject line read, "They're falling apart without you." Apparently, 3 more project managers had cycled through Pinnacle since my departure. The company had lost 2 major contracts. Richard was facing pressure from the board, and Nathan had been quietly let go. I closed the email without responding and turned my attention to my team brilliant people I'd hired because of their talent, not their connections or degrees. People I made sure knew they were valued every single day. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying someone else. Sometimes it's about refusing to let them destroy you and building something better from what they tried to take away. That day in the boardroom, standing in my red dress with the presentation clicker in my hand, I didn't just save my job, I found my power. And in the end, that was worth more than any corner office they could have offered me. So tell me, have you ever had to stand up for yourself when everyone expected you to stay quiet? Have you had to prove your worth to people who were ready to discard you? I read every comment, and your stories help me remember why sharing mine matters. If this resonated with you, Please subscribe to hear more truths that women like us rarely get to speak aloud. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message about valuing themselves, share this video with them. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply refusing to be a victim of someone else's story. The screen of my phone lit up during our team lunch. 12 coworkers packed around the conference table, passing containers of takeout between animated discussions about weekend plans. I glanced down at the notification from an unknown number. Leave the building now. Don't tell your coworkers. My heartbeat quickened. I read it again, waiting for a follow-up text that never came. Around me, Micah from accounting was describing his disastrous blind date, while Evelyn nodded sympathetically. Director Prentice leaned against the doorframe, laughing at someone's joke. Just a prank, I told myself. But something about the message's urgency made my skin prickle. Finley, you're quiet today, Prentice commented, those calculating eyes landing on me. Not enjoying the celebration lunch I ordered for everyone? The same lunch she'd insisted we all attend. The same lunch that kept the entire team on the 14th floor together. Sorry, I muttered, sliding my phone into my pocket. Just checking something. The room's temperature seemed to drop. 6 months as research division lead, and I still felt Prentice watching my every move. Yesterday's discovery burned in my mind. Financial records showing millions diverted from safety testing into offshore accounts. Records I wasn't supposed to access. I stood casually. Need some air. Back in 5. Prentice's expression shifted subtly. Everything all right? Fine, I replied, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Just need to stretch my legs. Walking, not running, to the elevator felt like wading through water. Each step measured, each breath controlled. The security desk was empty, unusual for midday. When the elevator doors opened to the lobby, I saw them. Men in tactical gear positioned near the entrance, trying to look inconspicuous among the potted plants and leather seating areas. I veered toward the service exit instead, pushed through the door, and stepped into the alleyway. The moment my foot hit the pavement, a deafening alarm blared from the building behind me. Heavy security shutters slammed down over every exit. I'd made it out by seconds, but my entire team was now locked inside. I'll never forget what I saw when I turned back. Through the only window without shutters, 14 floors up, Director Prentice stood watching me. When our eyes met, her expression transformed from shock to murderous rage. She pressed her palm against the glass, mouthing 3 words I could read even from the street. I'll find you. Before I continue, I need to say something. Many people listen to these stories but scroll away without subscribing. If what you're about to hear grips you, and believe me, what happened next changed everything. Take a second to like and subscribe. Because once you hear how this unfolds, you'll want to know when similar stories drop. My name is Finley Ash. 6 months ago, I became the youngest research division leader at one of the nation's premier biochemical facilities. My specialty? Developing enzymes that neutralize industrial toxins in soil. My work could potentially save ecosystems destroyed by chemical waste, if it ever saw the light of day. The thing about me that Director Prentice underestimated? I never forget details. Ever. It's both my gift and my curse. I remember conversations verbatim from years ago. I recall numbers after seeing them once, and I never, ever forget a betrayal. Standing in that alley, watching tactical teams surround the building where my colleagues remained trapped, I knew I needed to disappear. The weight of the flash drive in my bra felt suddenly heavier, the one containing copies of every document I'd discovered yesterday. Evidence of what our Environmental Restoration Division was actually developing, a military-grade contaminant designed to render soil unusable for generations. I ducked behind a dumpster as more vehicles arrived, black SUVs with tinted windows. Men in suits emerged, flashing badges at local police. Whatever was happening wasn't just company security. This was federal. My phone vibrated again. The same unknown number. Royal Gardens Metro Station. Northwest entrance. 20 minutes. Look for the blue cap. Who was this person? How did they know? Questions swirled as I pulled my jacket hood up and began walking, not toward the metro, but in the opposite direction. Trust nothing. Verify everything. I slipped into a corner store 3 blocks away, purchased a baseball cap, sunglasses, and a prepaid phone with cash. In the bathroom, I twisted my auburn hair into a tight bun, hiding it completely under the cap. The store's TV was tuned to local news. No breaking reports about my building yet. Whatever was happening was being contained. That scared me more than an all-out evacuation would have. 15 minutes left to make the meeting. Still uncertain if I should go. My mysterious texter had saved me from whatever was happening inside, but that didn't mean they were on my side. I used the prepaid phone to call an old college friend who worked in cybersecurity. Veda, it's Finley. I need help, no questions. Finn? What's wrong? You sound... The number that just texted me. Can you trace it? I read her the digits. Heard her fingers clacking on a keyboard. That's weird. It's bouncing between towers. Almost like, Finn, this looks like a government-grade anonymizer. My mouth went dry. Law enforcement? Could be. Or intelligence. Finn, what's going on? I ended the call without answering and removed my phone battery. The Royal Gardens station was a 10-minute walk. I still had no idea if I should go, but staying visible on the street wasn't an option either. I made my decision. Approaching the metro station from the opposite side, I watched the northwest entrance from across the street for 7 full minutes. Commuters streamed in and out. No one lingered suspiciously. At precisely the 20-minute mark, a tall figure in a navy peacoat and blue baseball cap descended the stairs into the station, not waiting for anyone, not looking around, just passing through as part of their routine. I followed at a distance, keeping 3 people between us at all times. The blue cap weaved through the crowd toward the eastbound platform, then stopped at a newspaper stand. I paused by a vending machine, pretending to search for change. The blue cap purchased a paper, then dropped something small behind the stand before walking away toward the platform. When the coast was clear, I casually approached, bent to tie my shoe, and reached behind the stand. My fingers closed around a tiny memory card. The eastbound train arrived. Blue cap boarded without ever looking in my direction. I remained on the platform, slipping the memory card into my pocket. 5 hours later, in a motel room paid for with cash under a false name, I finally examined its contents on the laptop I'd purchased at an electronics store. The file contained only 3 things: a message, an address in a small coastal town 200 miles away, and a photograph. The message: they're erasing everything. You have 72 hours before they find you. The photo made my blood freeze. It showed Director Prentice standing over a hospital bed where a man lay unconscious, connected to tubes and monitors. The man was Dr. Ellis Averitt, MPAU, my predecessor who had supposedly retired for health reasons 6 months ago. His retirement had opened the position I now held, the position that had given me access to discover what they were really developing, the position that had made me their next target. I sat motionless on the edge of the bed, piecing together a horrifying reality. Dr. Averitt had been researching soil rehabilitation techniques for 2 decades. His work was revolutionary, methods to restore ecosystems destroyed by industrial chemicals. When I took over his division, I found his research mysteriously incomplete, key components missing, notes that ended mid-sentence. I'd assumed he'd taken some knowledge into retirement. But now I understood. He hadn't retired. He'd discovered something, just as I had, and they'd silenced him. The project I'd been unknowingly advancing for 6 months wasn't about healing environmental damage. It was about creating a substance that could render vast agricultural regions permanently barren, a weapon disguised as its opposite. Yesterday, accessing financial records I wasn't supposed to see, I'd discovered enormous payments to offshore accounts, coinciding with meetings between Director Prentice and representatives from countries known for human rights violations. They were selling doomsday technology while claiming to develop environmental solutions. And now, like Averitt before me, I knew too much. The motel room television flickered with breaking news. A reporter stood outside my building, explaining that a chemical leak had prompted an evacuation. Behind her, workers in hazmat suits entered through the main doors. There was no chemical leak. This was a cover-up. I turned up the volume. Authorities are searching for Finley Ash, a research division leader who left the building shortly before the containment protocol was initiated. Officials want to question Ash about potential negligence related to the incident. My driver's license photo filled the screen. Just like that, I'd gone from respected scientist to fugitive. The narrative had been flipped. I wasn't the whistleblower. I was being framed as the perpetrator. My phone, the new prepaid one, buzzed with a text from Veda. They came to my apartment asking about you. Said you sabotaged equipment. Finn, what did you do? I stared at the message, a chill spreading through my body. They had already tracked my call to Veda. They were moving faster than I'd anticipated. I had to make a choice: run to the coastal address from the memory card, or try to gather more evidence to clear my name. Either way, I needed to disappear completely. Now, and somewhere in the shadows, watching this unfold, was the person in the blue cap, my unknown ally in this nightmare, or perhaps my unseen puppeteer. I'd need to become a ghost, someone without digital footprints or paper trails. I checked out of the motel before dawn, leaving the prepaid phone in a trash can 2 miles away. The coastal address was my only lead, a lifeline thrown by someone who, for reasons I couldn't fathom, wanted to help me. I purchased a bus ticket to a town 30 miles short of my actual destination. From there, I'd find another way forward, harder to track. During the 6-hour journey, I kept my cap pulled low, avoiding eye contact with other passengers. The driver announced stops in a monotone voice while I stared out the window, watching the urban landscape gradually surrender to rolling farmland. Farmland that people like Director Prentice were plotting to destroy. My mind drifted to when I first met her 9 months ago. The interview process had been grueling, 5 rounds of technical assessments and personality evaluations. When she'd finally offered me the position, her words still echoed in my memory. Your predecessor built this division, but you, Finley, you'll transform it. Your insight into enzymatic remediation techniques is exactly what we need to take this work to the next level. I'd been so proud, so honored. My parents, both school teachers who'd sacrificed everything for my education, had cried when I called with the news. After 15 years of study, research, and working my way up through lesser labs, I'd finally reached a position where my work could make a global difference. What a cruel joke it all seemed now. The bus lurched to a stop at a roadside diner. 30-minute break, the driver announced. Departing at 2:15 sharp, I needed to stretch my legs but hesitated at the thought of security cameras. Still, remaining on an empty bus might draw attention. I disembarked last, keeping my face angled away from the diner's entrance camera. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as bleary-eyed travelers lined up for coffee and prepackaged sandwiches. I ordered a black coffee and took it to the farthest booth, positioning myself with my back to the wall, facing the entrance. A television mounted above the counter played a news channel. The volume was low, but I could read the ticker at the bottom. Manhunt continues for scientists linked to laboratory containment breach. My hands trembled slightly, coffee threatening to spill. I set the cup down and focused on steadying my breathing. A woman slid into the booth across from me. Don't react, she said quietly. Keep looking normal. My muscles tensed. She was perhaps 50, with silver-streaked black hair cut in a practical bob. Nothing about her appearance suggested law enforcement or government agent. She wore hiking boots, khaki pants, and a faded denim jacket. Who are you? I whispered, calculating the distance to the emergency exit. Someone who worked with Ellis Everett before you. She placed a napkin on the table and slid it toward me. My name is Thea. I sent the text message yesterday. My pulse quickened. The blue cap at the metro? She nodded once. We don't have much time. You need to understand what you've stumbled into. They're developing environmental weapons, not restoration technology, I said, and selling them to foreign powers. Thea's expression darkened. That's just the surface. The project has a name, Operation Fallow Earth. It's designed to create targeted agricultural collapse in specific regions. The enzyme you've been perfecting doesn't just contaminate soil, it spreads through groundwater, multiplies, and adapts to different conditions. Cold dread settled in my stomach. That's not possible. The molecular structure would break down after Phalant. That's what we all thought, until Ellis discovered they'd spliced in self-replicating genetic material. Your division was solving the final piece, creating a delivery method that appears benign. A Trojan horse. I thought about the countless hours I'd spent in the lab, refining enzymatic structures, believing I was helping to heal poisoned ecosystems. All along, I'd been perfecting a doomsday weapon. Why would they do this? I asked, struggling to process the magnitude. Control, Thea said simply. Create artificial scarcity. Destroy competitors' agricultural capability. Force dependence on proprietary food sources. The applications are endless for those without moral constraints. And Ellis? When he discovered the truth, he tried to expose them. They poisoned him slowly, making it look like a degenerative condition. When that didn't silence him quickly enough, they accelerated the timeline. The image of Ellis in the hospital bed flashed in my mind. Is he still alive? Barely. They keep him in a medically induced coma at a private facility. Insurance, in case they need his knowledge. She checked her watch. Your bus leaves in 8 minutes. You can't be on it. Why are you helping me? Thea's eyes met mine, filled with a grief I couldn't fully comprehend. Ellis is my brother, and you're the only person with the expertise to help us stop this. My coffee sat untouched, growing cold. Us? There are others. Former researchers, whistleblowers. We've been gathering evidence for years, but we needed someone on the inside with access to the current formulations. She slid a key across the table. Rental car in the back lot, blue sedan. The address on the memory card is our safe house. I'll meet you there tonight. I hesitated, my trust stretched to breaking point. How do I know this isn't another trap? You don't, Thea acknowledged. But consider this. If I wanted to turn you in, I wouldn't be sitting here while federal agents swarm your original bus destination. They tracked your ticket purchase. As if on cue, my phone vibrated. The screen showed a news alert. Federal agents detain passengers at Hillcrest Bus Terminal in connection with fugitive scientist. My planned destination. If I'd stayed on that bus... Go now, Thea urged. Take country roads. Avoid main highways and toll booths. I pocketed the key and stood. If you're lying to me, I'm not the one who's been lying to you for 6 months, Finley. Her voice carried an edge of impatience. Director Prentice is holding an emergency press conference in an hour to announce your role in developing an unauthorized biological agent. They're painting you as an eco-terrorist. The reality of my situation crashed over me like a physical wave. There was no going back to my old life, no clearing my name through conventional channels. The people hunting me controlled the narrative, the evidence, and apparently, federal resources. I left without another word, slipping out the diner's side exit. The blue sedan waited in the far corner of the lot, partially hidden by a delivery truck. I scanned for surveillance cameras before approaching, then quickly got inside. The coastal address was 167 miles away according to the car's navigation system. I disabled it immediately, along with Bluetooth and any other wireless capabilities. Then I pulled out a paper map from the glove compartment and plotted a route using only back roads. As I drove away from the diner, the radio announced breaking news. I turned up the volume. Speaking live now from the headquarters of BioHorizon Industries is Director Camilla Prentice, addressing yesterday's laboratory incident. Prentice's voice filled the car, perfectly modulated to convey authority and regret. It is with profound disappointment that I must inform the public about a breach of trust within our research division. Finley Ash, hired 6 months ago to continue our groundbreaking environmental restoration work, has been secretly developing unauthorized biological agents with potentially catastrophic applications. My knuckles whitened around the steering wheel as she continued. We believe Ash intended to sell these formulations to foreign entities. When our security protocols detected unusual activity, Ash fled the facility moments before containment procedures were initiated. We are cooperating fully with federal authorities to apprehend this individual before further damage can be done. A reporter's voice cut in. Director Prentice, how could something like this happen under your supervision? An excellent question, Prentice replied, her voice softening with practiced humility. Ash came with impeccable credentials and recommendations. We are reviewing our hiring procedures, but I must emphasize that our internal safety protocols worked exactly as designed, preventing any release of harmful materials. I switched off the radio, nausea rising in my throat. The magnitude of the lie was breathtaking. They weren't just framing me, they were using me as cover for their entire operation. If they captured me now, I'd never get the chance to tell my side. I'd be disappeared, just like Ellis Everett. The rural landscape blurred past my windows as I pressed harder on the accelerator. Farmhouses and fields rolled by, places filled with people who had no idea their food security was being weaponized by people like Prentice. 3 hours into the journey, on a lonely stretch of county road, I noticed a black SUV appear in my rearview mirror. It maintained the same distance for several miles, never closing the gap, never falling behind. Just watching, waiting. I took a sharp right turn onto an unmarked dirt road, accelerating through the dust cloud my tires kicked up. The SUV followed. Not a coincidence. I'd been found. But how? I'd abandoned all traceable electronics. Unless I pulled over abruptly and popped the trunk. Throwing aside the spare tire cover, I ran my fingers along the underside of the carpet lining. There, a small, hard rectangle adhered to the metal. A tracking device. The blue sedan wasn't safety. It was surveillance. Thea hadn't been helping me escape. She'd been helping them track me. The SUV was closing in. I yanked the tracking device free and hurled it into the dense underbrush beside the road. My mind raced through possibilities. Had Thea intentionally led me into a trap? Or had her vehicle been compromised without her knowledge? Either way, staying with this car meant capture. I grabbed the small backpack containing my essentials and the flash drive, then plunged into the woods running perpendicular to the road. The dense foliage provided cover as I heard car doors slam behind me. Subject is on foot, heading west into the tree line. Male voices shouted commands. The crack of twigs and rustling leaves told me at least 3 people were in pursuit. I pushed deeper into the forest, brambles tearing at my clothes as I maintained a steady pace. Panic would only drain my energy faster. My graduate research had required extensive fieldwork. I'd spent months navigating remote wilderness areas collecting soil samples. Those skills were keeping me alive now. I spotted a shallow stream ahead and splashed into it, following its course downstream to mask my scent and footprints. The frigid water numbed my feet through my shoes, but I pressed on for nearly half a mile before climbing out on a rocky outcropping that wouldn't hold footprints. The voices behind me had faded. For the moment, I'd created distance. Slumped against a tree trunk, I tried to process Thea's betrayal. If she was working with Prentice, why go through such an elaborate charade? Why not simply have me arrested at the diner? Unless they needed something from me first. The flash drive, perhaps, or access to research notes I'd stored elsewhere. I pulled out the memory card Thea had left at the metro station. The coastal address could be another trap, but it was also my only lead. Without it, I had nowhere to go. As dusk approached, I navigated using the setting sun, moving steadily southeast, away from both the road and the coastal address. I needed time to think, to form a plan that didn't rely on anyone else's guidance. Night fell completely as I reached the edge of the forest. Beyond stretched acres of farmland, and in the distance, the twinkling lights of a small town. Too exposed to cross in darkness, I found a sheltered position beneath a fallen tree and prepared to wait for morning. The temperature dropped rapidly. I huddled deeper into my jacket, exhaustion finally overtaking adrenaline. My eyelids grew heavy despite my best efforts. A sharp crack jolted me awake. Disoriented, I realized I'd fallen asleep. The moon had shifted position. I'd been out for at least 2 hours. Another sound, a footstep, deliberately placed. Someone was approaching my hiding spot. I curled into the smallest shape possible, controlling my breathing. A beam of light swept the forest floor, passing inches from my position. Heat signature shows she was here recently. A woman's voice, not Thea's. Spread out, she can't have gone far. Male, authoritative. I remained perfectly still as flashlight beams crisscrossed the area. They were using thermal imaging. I had minutes, maybe seconds, before they found me. A soft thud sounded in the distance, followed by shouting. The flashlights immediately redirected away from me, moving toward the commotion. Contact, southwest perimeter. All units converge. The footsteps receded rapidly. Something or someone had diverted their attention. This was my only chance. I crawled from my hiding place and moved in the opposite direction, staying low to the ground. When I reached the field's edge, I noticed a drainage ditch running along its perimeter. Perfect cover for crossing the exposed ground. Sliding into the ditch, I began army crawling through its muddy bottom. The journey was agonizingly slow, but the overhead cover from tall grass made detection nearly impossible. After what felt like hours, I reached the outskirts of the small town. The illuminated sign of a 24-hour convenience store glowed a quarter-mile ahead, a potential risk, but I needed supplies and information. I approached cautiously, checking for surveillance cameras before entering. The sleepy cashier barely looked up from his phone as I purchased water, protein bars, and a local map. The store television played an overnight news program, intensifying the search for fugitive scientist Finley Ash, now believed to be armed and dangerous. Federal authorities have expanded the search perimeter to include 3 additional counties after a possible sighting near Willow Creek. Willow Creek was over 50 miles from my current location. Either someone had misidentified me, or the authorities were deliberately broadcasting misinformation. I studied the map under the store's fluorescent lights. 15 miles northeast was a freight rail line that connected to major shipping ports. If I could reach it by dawn, I might be able to hop a train heading toward the coast. Outside the store, I glimpsed a battered pickup truck with the keys left in the ignition. The temptation to steal it was overwhelming, but that would trigger immediate alerts. Instead, I continued on foot, using residential streets with minimal lighting. Dawn was breaking when I reached the railway. I'd walked through the night, pushing my body beyond exhaustion. Concealed in the tall grass beside the tracks, I waited. 2 hours later, a slow-moving freight train approached. As it labored up a slight incline, I made my move, running alongside an empty boxcar and pulling myself inside. The interior was dark and dusty, empty except for some abandoned packing materials. I collapsed against the wall, finally allowing my muscles to relax. The rhythmic clacking of the train's wheels provided strange comfort as miles disappeared behind me. My thoughts returned to Thea. The tactical team hunting me had used thermal imaging, technology far beyond standard law enforcement equipment. This was a militarized operation. Had Thea known what she was sending me into? Was she a willing participant in this manhunt, or another pawn in Prentice's game? I pulled out the memory card again, examining the coastal address. What waited for me there? A safe house filled with allies, or another carefully orchestrated trap? Only one way to find out. The train journey lasted 6 hours, stopping occasionally in rail yards where I remained hidden in the shadows of the boxcar. When it finally approached the coastal region, I disembarked on the outskirts of a small fishing town. The salty air filled my lungs as I oriented myself using the map. The address was 3 miles north, in an area marked as private shoreline. I followed coastal paths, keeping the ocean to my right and dense vegetation to my left. Perfect coverage if I needed to disappear quickly. As the sun began setting, I spotted the property, a weathered blue cottage perched on a rocky bluff overlooking the sea. No vehicles visible, no signs of surveillance equipment, just a solitary structure against the darkening sky. I circled the property twice, watching for movement from a concealed position among coastal shrubs. Nothing. The cottage appeared empty. Approaching the back entrance, I tested the door handle. Locked. I found a window with a broken latch and carefully worked it open, then slipped inside. The interior was sparsely furnished but clean. No dust on surfaces, fresh food in the refrigerator. Someone had been here recently. I conducted a thorough search, checking for cameras or listening devices. Nothing obvious, but that didn't mean they weren't there. On the kitchen table sat a laptop computer. Open, powered on, waiting. A message displayed on the screen. Finley, if you're reading this, you've made it safely. I know you have no reason to trust me after what happened with the tracking device. It wasn't my car. The vehicle was compromised after I left it for you. We've been infiltrated. Trust no one until you've viewed the enclosed files. The password is the name of Ellis's first research station in Argentina. You visited it during your doctoral work. I stared at the message, conflicted. How would Thea know about my doctoral research? That information wasn't publicly available. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, then typed, Esperanza Basin. The screen unlocked, revealing dozens of video files. The first was security footage from our research facility, specifically, the conference room where our team lunches were held. The timestamp showed the day of my escape. Director Prentice stood at the head of the table, addressing my colleagues. Today's demonstration will prove conclusively that our formulation works exactly as designed, she was saying. The containment protocol will simulate actual deployment conditions. Your participation is crucial to the final testing phase. My blood ran cold. The chemical leak hadn't been a cover story invented after my escape. It had been planned all along. They had gathered my entire team in that room intentionally. I clicked on the next file. A grainy video showed Ellis Averett speaking directly to the camera, his face gaunt, but his eyes clear and focused. If you're watching this, I'm likely dead or still being held in medical containment. My name is Ellis Averett. Until 6 months ago, I led research at BioHorizon Industries' environmental division. What I'm about to share will sound like the ravings of a paranoid mind. I only ask that you review the supporting documentation before making that judgment. Ellis detailed the evolution of Project Fallow Earth, PST, how it had begun as legitimate research into soil remediation, but had been gradually corrupted under Prentice's leadership, how research findings were manipulated, data falsified, and dangerous components introduced without the knowledge of most team members. They needed specialists who wouldn't recognize the broader implications of their individual contributions, Ellis explained. Compartmentalization allowed brilliant minds to unwittingly create something monstrous, just as I had done. The final video was the most disturbing. Dated 3 weeks earlier, it showed Prentice meeting with uniformed military officials from countries known for human rights violations. They discussed deployment scenarios, pricing structures, and exclusivity agreements. The weapon I'd helped create was being auctioned to the highest bidders. My hands shook as I closed the laptop. The cottage suddenly felt exposed. If Thea had been compromised, this location might be as well. I was gathering my belongings to leave when headlights swept across the front windows. A vehicle was approaching the cottage. I doused all lights and moved to a position where I could observe without being seen. A single figure emerged from the car, a woman, walking with a slight limp, Thea. She approached the front door cautiously, then stopped. Something had alerted her. She turned, scanning the surroundings, then quickly returned to her vehicle and drove away without entering. I remained frozen in place, unsure what had spooked her. 20 minutes passed in silence before I dared move again. That's when I noticed it. A small red light blinking beneath the kitchen table. A device that hadn't been there during my initial search. Someone had been here before me. Someone had planted surveillance equipment and left. I needed to disappear again. But first, I had to secure the evidence on the laptop. I copied all files onto my flash drive, then wiped the computer's hard drive completely. As I prepared to leave through the same window I'd entered, a new text message appeared on the burner phone I'd purchased. Cottage compromised. Ellis moved to secondary location. They know you've accessed the files. Prentice arriving with tactical team in 30 minutes. Head to Lighthouse Point. Boat waiting. This is your last chance to trust me, T. Trust. Such a simple word for something so impossibly complex in this moment. The moon had risen, casting silver light across the coastal path as I weighed my options. The lighthouse stood on a rocky peninsula a mile north of the cottage, exposed, visible from all directions, perfect for an ambush. Or perfect for a genuine escape. I had 30 minutes to decide if Thea was my salvation or my executioner. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Trust had become a luxury I couldn't afford, yet doing nothing wasn't an option either. I slipped outside, staying low beneath the cottage windows. The coastal wind carried the scent of salt and seaweed as I analyzed my surroundings. 2 escape routes presented themselves. Follow Thea's instructions to the lighthouse, or disappear into the dense coastal forests stretching inland. The wilderness offered anonymity but no destination. The lighthouse offered purpose but potential betrayal. My scientific mind demanded data before conclusions. I needed more information about Thea. I pulled out the memory card again, examining the metadata on the files. Most had been created months ago, long before I'd discovered the truth about Project Fallow Earth. The timestamps aligned with Ellis Averett's employment timeline. If Thea was working with Prentice, why provide evidence that predated my involvement? Why supply files that implicated Prentice so thoroughly? 25 minutes until Prentice's team arrived. I made my decision. Moving silently along the coastal path, I positioned myself 200 yards from the lighthouse, concealed among jagged rocks. From this vantage point, I could observe without committing. The lighthouse stood stark against the night sky, its automated beams sweeping across the dark water. Below it, a small dock extended into a sheltered cove. A fishing boat bobbed gently against the moorings. No signs of an ambush team. No tactical vehicles hidden nearby. 20 minutes left. I crept closer, using natural cover. When I reached the base of the lighthouse, I circled it completely, checking for hidden personnel. Nothing. The boat's cabin lights were off, but I could make out a single figure sitting in the darkness. As I watched, they struck a match, briefly illuminating Thea's face as she lit a cigarette. She was alone, waiting, a dangerous chance to take if she were truly setting a trap. 15 minutes remaining. The distant sound of vehicles reached my ears, coming from the direction of the cottage. Prentice's team arriving early. I had seconds to decide. I emerged from the rocks and sprinted toward the dock. Thea spotted me immediately, extinguishing her cigarette and starting the boat's engine. "Quickly!" she called, extending her hand as I leapt aboard. "They're already here." The boat's motor roared to life as I landed on the deck. Thea pushed away from the dock, navigating into deeper water with practiced efficiency. Behind us, flashlight beams swept the coastal path. Voices called out commands. We were spotted just as the boat cleared the cove's entrance. "Down!" Thea shouted as a crack split the air. A bullet struck the water beside us. I dropped to the deck as Thea opened the throttle fully. The small fishing vessel surged forward, bouncing violently over the waves as we escaped into the darkness. For 10 minutes, neither of us spoke. Thea focused on navigating while I kept watch for pursuit vessels. None appeared. When the coastline had faded to a distant smudge, Thea finally addressed me. "I'm sorry about the car. I didn't know it was tracked." "Who are you really?" I demanded. "How do you know about my doctoral research? About Esperanza Basin?" Thea reduced the engine to a quieter purr before answering. "I was Ellis's research partner for 15 years. We documented everything Prentice and her team were doing, built evidence piece by piece. When they poisoned him, I continued alone. And you recruited me because?" "We didn't recruit you," she corrected. "Prentice did. But we'd been watching you for years. Your published papers on enzymatic soil remediation caught Ellis's attention. He said you were either going to complete his work for good or for evil, depending on who reached you first. So, when I discovered the truth, we were ready. We've had contingency plans in place for whoever filled Ellis's position." She adjusted our course slightly. "The text warning you to leave the building came from me. I had infiltrated their security systems months ago." The boat rocked gently as we traveled parallel to the coastline, always maintaining distance. My mind processed this new information against everything I'd experienced. "Where are we going?" I finally asked. "To Ellis. The real Ellis." "He's alive?" "The photo on the memory card was taken 3 months ago. We managed to extract him from their medical facility 6 weeks ago, but he's still recovering." Dawn was breaking as we approached a different section of coastline, MBAM, more rugged, with towering cliffs rather than beaches. Thea navigated toward a narrow opening in the rock face, barely visible until we were nearly upon it. The passage led to a concealed cove with a small private dock. Camouflaged among the rocks and trees stood a modern structure of concrete and glass, architecture designed to blend with the natural surroundings. "Our research station," Thea explained as she cut the engine. "Off-grid, self-sufficient, and invisible to satellite imaging." 2 people emerged from the building as we docked, a tall man with a close-cropped gray beard and a younger woman with dark skin and precisely braided hair. "This is Dr. Nora Kellis, our biochemical engineer," Thea introduced, "and Dr. Malik, our security specialist." Dr. Kellis approached first, her expression cautious. "You've been all over the news, Dr. Ash. Quite the reputation you've developed." "None of it my doing," I responded, stepping onto the dock. "We know," Dr. Malik said, his British accent unexpected. We've been monitoring the disinformation campaign against you. Quite sophisticated. They led me through a hidden entrance into the facility. Unlike the sterile environment of BioHorizons laboratories, this space felt alive. Plants growing in specialized containers, natural light streaming through strategic windows, the quiet hum of advanced equipment. We call it the sanctuary, Thea explained. Part research facility, part safe house. How many of you are there? 17 former BioHorizon scientists and researchers. Dr. Kellis answered. All of us discovered pieces of Project Fallow Earth. All of us were targeted in various ways when we raised concerns. We entered a large central room filled with monitors displaying news feeds, scientific data, and surveillance imagery. Several people worked at computer stations, barely glancing up as we entered. Welcome to Resistance Headquarters, Dr. Malik said with grim humor. Not quite what you'd expect from a group of scientists, is it? It wasn't. This wasn't just a hideout. It was an operation. Organized, equipped, and purposeful. Where's Ellis? I asked. Thea led me through another doorway into a medical suite. On a bed surrounded by monitoring equipment lay Ellis Averett. His body was thin, almost skeletal, but his eyes were alert as we entered. Finley Ash, he said, his voice surprisingly strong despite his frail appearance. I hoped you'd make it. Dr. Averett. I approached his bedside. I've been using your research notes for months. And improving on them, I'm told. His lips curved in a slight smile, though not in the direction I intended. I didn't know. Of course you didn't. He waved away my apology. Compartmentalization, the perfect tool for turning good scientists into unwitting accomplices. Over the next hour, Ellis filled in the gaps in my knowledge. Project Fallow Earth had evolved from a legitimate soil remediation program into a weaponized system capable of rendering agricultural land sterile for decades. The modifications I'd made, believing I was improving environmental restoration capabilities, had actually enhanced its destructive potential. The enzyme's delivery mechanism was the final challenge, Ellis explained. They needed a way to introduce it that wouldn't trigger immediate detection. Your work on encapsulation techniques solved that problem. My stomach twisted with the realization. The celebration, lunch, the day I received the text message, was that, a field test, Thea confirmed, using your colleagues as test subjects for exposure levels. Horror washed over me. Are they alive but quarantined? Dr. Kellis interjected. Prentice is monitoring them for symptoms, cellular changes, immune responses. Your team became living test subjects. The magnitude of Prentice's betrayal left me speechless. Not just of me, but of an entire division of scientists who had trusted her leadership. Why would she risk exposing her own facility? I finally asked. Controlled testing environment, Ellis replied. And expendable personnel who already had security clearances. Perfect conditions for a final verification before selling to international clients. Dr. Malik approached with a tablet displaying satellite imagery. Prentice has scheduled demonstrations for potential buyers next week. 3 locations, all on American soil, disguised as environmental remediation projects. I studied the coordinates. All 3 were agricultural regions crucial to food production. They're going to contaminate our own farmland as a sales demonstration. I couldn't mask my disbelief. Small areas, easily contained in their view, Thea explained. But our analysis suggests the enzyme will spread much further than their models predict. Once released, it could affect thousands of square miles through groundwater migration. We need to stop them, I said, the words feeling inadequate against the scale of the threat. That's why you're here, Ellis replied. You understand the enzyme structure better than anyone, even me. You need to develop a neutralizing agent. I'd need samples, equipment, data. We have everything, Dr. Kellis interrupted, including samples of your most recent formulations. The question is whether you can create a countermeasure before the demonstrations begin. How long do I have? 5 days. An impossible timeline for normal research. But these weren't normal circumstances. Show me the lab, I said. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of intensive work. I slept in short bursts, often at the workstation. The sanctuary's facilities were remarkable. Equipment I'd never seen outside of elite research institutions. computing power that could process complex molecular simulations in minutes instead of days. Dr. Kellis worked alongside me, her expertise in biochemical engineering complementing my knowledge of enzymatic structures. Together, we identified the self-replicating components Ellis had mentioned, genetic material spliced into the enzyme's core that allowed it to adapt to different soil conditions. It's brilliant in a horrifying way, Doctor. Kellis observed as we studied the molecular models. The enzyme doesn't just contaminate, it transforms, permanently altering soil chemistry to prevent normal plant growth. And it spreads through groundwater, I added, multiplying as it goes. One small application could render an entire watershed sterile. On the third day, we had our breakthrough. The enzyme's replication mechanism had a fatal weakness, a dependency on specific mineral compounds to maintain stability during reproduction. Deprive it of those compounds, and the entire structure would collapse. We need a mineral chelation agent, I explained to the team during our briefing, something that will bind to the specific minerals the enzyme requires, making them unavailable. Like treating metal poisoning in humans. Ellis nodded, understanding immediately. Exactly. We've identified 3 mineral compounds essential to the enzyme's replication process. If we can develop a chelation formula that targets those specifically, we can neutralize entire contaminated areas. How quickly can you produce it? Dr. Malik asked. The formula is relatively simple, Dr. Kellis answered. The challenge is delivery. We need to match their deployment method to ensure complete coverage. We have another problem, Thea interrupted, entering with a tablet displaying a news feed. Prentice has moved up the schedule. First demonstration is tomorrow at sunrise. The room fell silent as implications settled over us. Where? Ellis finally asked. Walker County Agricultural District. They're disguising it as an emergency soil treatment following a fabricated chemical spill. I looked at Dr. Kellis. We need to finalize the neutralizing agent now. No more testing iterations. That's dangerous, she cautioned. We haven't confirmed long-term stability. We don't have time for long-term anything, I countered. If that enzyme gets released tomorrow, thousands of acres of farmland will be destroyed. Ellis raised a hand, silencing our debate. Both concerns are valid. We need a 2-track approach. Finley, you and Nora complete the neutralizing agent. Thea, Malik, prepare an intervention team. If we can't neutralize the enzyme, we need to prevent its deployment entirely. The next 12 hours were the most intense of my professional life. As midnight approached, Dr. Kellis and I finalized the chelation formula and produced enough to treat approximately 50 acres, a fraction of what we might need, but all our equipment could synthesize in the available time. Meanwhile, Thea and Dr. Malik prepared tactical equipment I never expected to see scientists handling with such proficiency. You're not just researchers, are you? I asked Thea as she checked what appeared to be communications gear. Most of us started that way, she replied without looking up. Circumstances required adaptation. At 3 a.m., we gathered for final briefing. Dr. Malik displayed satellite imagery of the target location, a vast agricultural research field surrounded by commercial farmland. Prentice's team will arrive at 5:30 a.m., 1 hour before sunrise. He explained. Their standard protocol requires 30 minutes for equipment setup. Deployment is scheduled precisely at sunrise, 6:32 a.m. Our window is extremely narrow, Thea continued. We need to intercept after their equipment is in place, but before deployment begins. What about law enforcement? I asked. Can't we alert them? With what evidence? Ellis replied from his wheelchair. His insistence on participating had overridden medical advice. Prentice has connections throughout federal agencies. By the time we convinced anyone, the demonstration would be complete. We're on our own, Dr. Malik confirmed. As we prepared to depart, Ellis called me to his side. Finley, there's something you should know. Something I haven't told the others. His expression was grave, his voice lowered. Project Fallow Earth has a secondary component. The enzyme doesn't just target plant life. Extended exposure affects mammalian cellular structures as well. My blood ran cold. It's designed to harm people too. Not immediately. The effects manifest slowly. Reproductive issues first, then neurological symptoms. By the time a population realizes what's happening, it's too late. My God, I whispered. It's not just an agricultural weapon. It's a slow-acting genocide tool, Ellis confirmed, targeting food supplies first, then the people themselves. Prentice is selling the ultimate weapon of mass destruction, IS, one that leaves infrastructure intact while eliminating populations. The revelation transformed everything. This wasn't just about saving farmland anymore. The stakes had become incalculably higher. As our team loaded equipment into unmarked vehicles, I felt a transformation within myself. The scientist who had dedicated her life to healing damaged ecosystems was now preparing for battle to prevent their deliberate destruction. Director Prentice hadn't just betrayed me professionally. She had betrayed humanity itself. And as we drove through the darkness toward Walker County, I made a silent promise. This would end today, not just for me, but for every person whose life hung in the balance without their knowledge. Prentice's reckoning was coming. The pre-dawn darkness cloaked our approach to Walker County. We traveled in 2 vehicles. Dr. Malik drove our lead car containing the neutralizing agent, while Thea followed with Ellis and additional equipment. The agricultural research station loomed ahead, its perimeter marked by chain-link fencing and security lights. 2 entrance points, Dr. Malik observed, passing me a pair of night vision binoculars. Main gate is guarded. Service entrance on the east side appears minimally secured. I scanned the facility. Several vehicles were already parked near a central building, black SUVs with tinted windows and a large truck with equipment loaded in its bed. Prentice had arrived early. They're ahead of schedule, I warned, checking my watch. 5:12 a.m. We have less time than we thought. Dr. Malik parked in a grove of trees a quarter-mile from the facility. Thea pulled in beside us, and we quickly unloaded our equipment. Remember, Ellis said as we gathered for final instructions, our primary objective is preventing the enzyme deployment. Confronting Prentice is secondary. But for me, the 2 objectives had become inseparable. The woman who had manipulated me, endangered my colleagues, and planned ecological devastation needed to face consequences. We approached the east fence under cover of darkness. Dr. Malik produced specialized cutting tools, creating an opening large enough to pass through. Inside the perimeter, we split into 2 teams. Thea and Dr. Malik would secure the deployment equipment, while Ellis and I would locate Prentice and the enzyme containers. "Comm check," Thea whispered, adjusting her earpiece. We all responded in sequence. 4 scientists playing at infiltration. The absurdity wasn't lost on me, but desperation had transformed us all. "Central field, 2 o'clock, Ellis directed, pointing toward figures moving around what appeared to be spraying equipment. Standard agricultural dispersal system. We moved silently through rows of experimental crops, using their height as cover. As we drew closer, voices became distinguishable. "Calibration complete," a male technician called. "Ready for loading." "Proceed with container transfer," replied a voice I instantly recognized. Director Prentice stood beside the spraying equipment, tablet in hand, directing the operation with clinical detachment. 4 large canisters were being wheeled toward the sprayer, each containing enough of the enzyme to contaminate hundreds of acres. "Dr. Malik, status?" I whispered into my communicator. "In position near the control panel," came the response. "Ready to disable on your mark." I glanced at Ellis, who nodded grimly. "Remember the sequence," he reminded me. "Disable equipment, neutralize samples, secure evidence." The eastern horizon had begun to lighten imperceptibly. We had perhaps 20 minutes before the scheduled deployment. "Execute," Ellis commanded. Dr. Malik's team moved first. A small electromagnetic pulse device, something I hadn't known existed outside of military applications, disabled the sprayer's electronic controls. Simultaneously, Thea approached from the opposite direction, creating a diversion by activating the facility's fire alarm system. Confusion erupted among Prentice's team. Security personnel moved toward the main building, investigating the alarm. The technicians working on the sprayer stepped back, uncertain what had caused the equipment failure. Prentice remained calm, issuing orders to override the system manually. She hadn't noticed us yet. This was our moment. Ellis and I approached the enzyme canisters, carrying our neutralizing agent. We had mere seconds before someone spotted us. I reached the first canister and was preparing to inject our formula when a shout went up. Security breach. Perimeter east fence. Prentice spun around, her eyes widening as they locked with mine. Recognition. Then fury crossed her face. Ash, she hissed. How predictable. Two security guards changed direction, moving toward us with weapons drawn. Dr. Malik intercepted one, displaying combat skills I wouldn't have expected from a scientist. Thea engaged the other, creating crucial seconds for us to work. I turned my attention back to the canisters, injecting our neutralizing agent into the first one. The chelation process would take minutes to fully neutralize the enzyme, time we didn't have. Stop her, Prentice commanded, moving toward me with surprising speed. Ellis positioned his wheelchair between us. Hello, Camilla, he said, his voice steady. It's been a while. Prentice froze, genuine shock replacing her composed expression. Ellis? You're supposed to be… What? Dead? Comatose? Yes, your medical team was quite thorough. Not thorough enough, evidently. While they confronted each other, I moved to the second canister, then the third, injecting our formula. One remaining. Prentice recovered quickly, reaching for her phone. This changes nothing. In fact, having you both here simplifies matters. One accident, two problematic researchers eliminated. You've underestimated us, Camilla, Ellis replied. We know everything. Project Fallow Earth, the secondary mammalian effects, the international buyers. You know nothing. She snapped, her composure cracking. You're playing at corporate espionage, Ellis. This is global security. Targeted agricultural control ensures American dominance in an unstable world. You're selling a weapon that kills people slowly through their food supply, I interjected, moving toward the final canister. There's no patriotic justification for genocide. Genocide? Prentice laughed coldly. We're talking about precision targeting of hostile agricultural systems. Collateral effects are expected in any strategic operation. As she spoke, I injected the final canister. All 4 enzyme containers were now being neutralized from within. A small victory, but not enough. The horizon was brightening. More security personnel were converging on our position. Thea and Dr. Malik were now surrounded, though still fighting. Prentice smiled, sensing her advantage. Your little sabotage attempt has failed, Finley. Even if you've somehow compromised today's demonstration, we have production facilities worldwide. The technology exists. It can't be undone. That's when I revealed the truth she didn't know. This was never about stopping one demonstration, Director. I held up my phone, which had been recording our entire exchange. This was about exposing you. Her eyes narrowed. To whom? Your fugitives. Discredited. No one will believe you. They already do, Ellis interjected. As we speak, your conversation is being transmitted to 17 different secure servers. From there, it's being distributed to every major news organization, regulatory agency, and international monitoring body. I continued. Your buyers are also receiving it. All those representatives from countries you promised exclusivity. They're learning you've sold the same technology to their adversaries. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Prentice's face. You're bluffing. Simultaneously, Ellis added, comprehensive data packages detailing Project Fallow Earth are being delivered to the Environmental Protection Agency, Department of Agriculture, and World Health Organization. Your own research, Camilla. Your own documentation of intentional soil contamination and expected human casualties. The security team had reached us now, but they hesitated, hearing fragments of our conversation. Doubt was visible on their faces. These men work for a private security firm contracted by BioHorizon. I addressed them directly. They aren't legally obligated to participate in environmental terrorism or human rights violations. In fact, they're now witnesses to an admission of criminal intent. Several guards exchanged glances. Their loyalty was clearly wavering. Dawn had broken. The time for the demonstration had arrived, but the spraying equipment remained disabled, the enzyme neutralized. In that moment of hesitation, everything changed. The facility's main gate burst open as vehicles bearing federal agency markings entered. Not Prentice's allies, These were responding to the evidence packages our team had distributed hours earlier as a contingency plan. Director Camilla Prentice, a woman in a dark suit, approached, flanked by agents. I'm Special Agent Vanessa Chen, Environmental Crimes Division. You're wanted for questioning regarding allegations of environmental terrorism, criminal conspiracy, and fraud. Prentice's face contorted with rage. This is a corporate security matter. You have no jurisdiction here. We have multiple federal warrants, Agent Chen replied evenly, and cooperation requests from 3 international bodies. Your corporate security matter became federal jurisdiction when you weaponized restricted biological compounds. As Prentice was led away, her final glare promised retribution, but we both knew her power was broken. The carefully constructed narrative she'd created, positioning me as the rogue scientist while she played the concerned executive, had collapsed entirely. The sun climbed higher as federal agents secured the facility. Our team was detained as well, but treated as witnesses rather than suspects. The enzyme canisters were confiscated for analysis, their contents now harmless thanks to our neutralizing agent. In the following days, the full scope of Project Fallow Earth was revealed to a horrified public. BioHorizon Industries' stock collapsed as investigations uncovered decades of environmental crimes. International arrest warrants were issued for executives who had fled the country. My colleagues, the unwitting test subjects from that fateful lunch, were transferred to specialized medical facilities. The exposure had been limited, and our neutralizing agent proved effective in treating their symptoms. Recovery would be slow but complete. 1 month later, I sat across from Agent Chen in a secure debriefing facility. The formal interviews had concluded days ago, but she had requested this final meeting. Dr. Ash, I want to personally thank you for your courage, she began. Your evidence was instrumental in dismantling one of the most dangerous environmental conspiracies we've encountered. What happens now? I asked. Director Prentice faces multiple life sentences. 7 other executives have been indicted. The company's assets have been frozen pending further investigation. She paused. As for you, your name has been officially cleared. The Department of Justice issued a formal exoneration yesterday. Relief washed over me, though it felt strangely hollow after everything that had happened. And my team? The other scientists? Most will recover fully. They've all been offered positions with legitimate research institutions. Agent Chen smiled slightly. Including you, if you're interested. The Environmental Protection Agency is establishing a new division focused on soil remediation technologies. They've requested you specifically to lead it. The irony wasn't lost on me. The work I'd thought I was doing all along, healing damaged ecosystems rather than destroying them, could now become reality. What about Ellis and the others at the sanctuary? Officially, we know nothing about any sanctuary, Agent Chen replied carefully. Unofficially, their contributions have been noted at the highest levels. They'll be protected. As our meeting concluded, Agent Chen handed me a sealed envelope. This arrived for you yesterday. We've verified it's safe. Inside was a handwritten note from Ellis. Finley, the truth is, both our weapon and our shield. You wielded it perfectly. The sanctuary remains if you ever need it. The door is always open. 2 days later, I stood on the steps of the federal courthouse after providing final testimony against Prentice. Reporters called questions from behind barriers. Cameras flashed. For weeks, I had been the scientist who exposed an international conspiracy, my face appearing on news broadcasts worldwide. But as the media circus continued, I realized something profound. The revenge I had initially sought against Prentice for framing me had transformed into something far more important: justice for the environment and the communities who depended on it. My personal vindication was merely a footnote in a larger story about corporate accountability and scientific ethics. The text message that had saved me that day had set in motion not just my survival, but the prevention of global catastrophe. As I descended the courthouse steps, a familiar figure waited beside a nondescript car, Thea, now serving as liaison between former BioHorizon scientists and federal investigators. Ready to disappear for a while? She asked as I approached. I nodded, suddenly exhausted by the public scrutiny. More than ready. Ellis has set up a new research facility. Off the books, but with unofficial government blessing. Real environmental remediation this time. No more compartmentalization, I asked. Complete transparency, she confirmed. Every scientist knows exactly what they're working on and why. As we drove away from the courthouse, I watched the city recede in the side mirror. My thoughts returned to that moment in the break room, unwrapping my sandwich, receiving the text that changed everything. One simple warning had cascaded into the exposure of a global conspiracy. One moment of trust in an anonymous message had prevented ecological disaster. If you've stayed with me through this story, you understand the power of truth, how it can be buried, distorted, but never permanently silenced. Like those environmental enzymes I once studied, truth finds a way to persist, to spread, to transform landscapes. For those listening who face their own moments of decision, when staying silent seems safer than speaking up, remember that courage isn't about fearlessness. It's about acting despite fear. It's about trusting that one voice, one action, one moment of bravery can trigger consequences beyond imagination. Director Prentice never understood that attempting to bury the truth is like trying to contain an enzyme designed to spread. The harder you work to suppress it, the more dramatically it eventually emerges. My name is Finley Ash. I was nearly erased. My reputation destroyed. My life threatened. My work corrupted. Instead, I became the catalyst for exposing one of history's most dangerous environmental conspiracies. All because I chose to trust a text message from an unknown number during my lunch break. If you found yourself holding your breath during any part of this story, if you felt that surge of satisfaction when justice finally arrived, take a moment to like and subscribe. More stories of ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances are waiting to be told. Moments when a single decision changes everything. Because sometimes, the most important message you'll ever receive comes when you least expect it, from someone you don't know, telling you to walk away from everything familiar into an uncertain future. And sometimes, trusting that message makes all the difference. Your project timelines have been consistently problematic, and client feedback indicates dissatisfaction with your creative direction. I sat across from Nate, my pulse quickening as he flipped through my performance review with practiced disappointment. The conference room felt smaller than usual, the glass walls suddenly too transparent as colleagues glanced in while passing. 6 months of exhausting work reduced to a series of alleged failures. I'm particularly concerned about the West Side campaign, he continued, not looking up from his papers. The execution lacked the innovation we expect. My mouth went dry. The West Side campaign had doubled their customer engagement, something the client had personally called to thank me for last week, but they specifically mentioned I started. Please, let me finish, Nate interrupted, holding up his hand. I have several examples here. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Normally, I'd ignore it during something as important as a performance review, but something made me discreetly check the screen while Nate shuffled through more papers. Unknown number. Don't react. Your boss is recording everything. Be careful what you say. I controlled my expression, looking back up to find Nate watching me intently. I smiled apologetically and slipped the phone away, my mind racing. His company phone lay face down on the table, unusual for someone who typically kept it in his suit pocket. As he resumed speaking, I noticed his posture seemed off, slightly angled as though hiding something beneath his blazer. Your teammates have expressed concerns about your collaboration skills, he continued. Would you like to share your thoughts on your relationships with other designers? The question hung in the air, oddly specific. Fishing for criticism of my colleagues? I remembered the text and chose my words carefully. I value everyone on the team, I said blandly. We all bring different strengths. Nate's mouth tightened almost imperceptibly. He shifted in his chair, and I caught a glimpse of something small and black beneath his jacket. Let's discuss Alex's recent presentation. You seemed displeased. Another trap. Alex had presented my concept without attribution after Nate reassigned my project to him last minute. I thought Alex did an excellent job with the presentation, I said evenly, ignoring the heat rising in my neck. Nate's eyes narrowed briefly before he checked his watch. I need to step out for a moment. Please review these improvement metrics while I'm gone. He slid a folder across the table and left, closing the door behind him. The silence pressed against my ears. I waited 3 seconds, then 5 before moving. Something about the plant on the credenza had caught my eye, a tiny reflection where there shouldn't be one. I approached cautiously and discovered a small black recording device nestled among the leaves, its red light blinking steadily. My heart hammered against my ribs. Why was he recording me secretly? And who had sent that warning text? A soft click came from the door handle. I barely made it back to my seat before Nate returned, a fresh coffee in hand. "Now, where were we?" he asked, settling back into his chair. "Ah, yes, your performance improvement plan. I'll need you to sign this acknowledgement that we've discussed your areas of concern." He slid a document toward me, dense with text highlighting supposed failures and mediocre results, none of which reflected reality. This wasn't just an unfair review. It was a paper trail designed to push me out. As I stared at the signature line, a chilling realization washed over me. I wasn't the first, and I wouldn't be the last, unless someone stopped him. If you're enjoying this story so far, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Trust me, you'll want to know what happens next. My name is Tess Everhart, and until 6 months ago, I was known for my innovative approach to visual storytelling. I'd built a reputation in the design world through dedication and creativity, talents that caught Nate Pike's attention when he recruited me to breathe new life into his struggling design group. The first 2 weeks were everything I'd hoped for. My new colleagues welcomed me warmly, particularly Olivia, who had been with the company for 5 years. She gave me the unofficial orientation, showing me the best lunch spots and warning me about the temperamental printer on the 3rd floor. "We're so glad you're here," she'd said, her smile genuine. "We need fresh energy after everything that's happened." "What do you mean?" I'd asked. "We lost 3 designers in 2 months. Talented people just left." Nate said they couldn't handle the pressure, but she'd looked around before lowering her voice. It felt sudden, like something wasn't right. I should have paid more attention to that warning, but I was too eager to prove myself. My first project was for a local theater company needing to attract younger audiences. I worked late nights, creating a campaign that blended classical elements with modern aesthetics. When I presented it to the team, the reception was enthusiastic. "This is exactly what they need," Olivia had exclaimed. Even Shy Ben from the digital team spoke up. "The interconnection between physical and digital touchpoints is brilliant." I felt I'd found my place, until Nate stepped in. "It's a start," he said, arms crossed. "But it lacks depth. The execution is elementary." The room's energy deflated instantly. My colleagues avoided eye contact, suddenly fascinated by their notebooks. "Perhaps," he continued, "we should consider a different direction. Ben, why don't you take a pass at the digital components? Olivia, you rework the print materials. Tess, observe how a more experienced team approaches this." I was effectively removed from my own project. When the campaign launched 2 weeks later, virtually identical to my original design, the client was thrilled. In the company-wide email announcing its success, Nate praised the team effort led by our veterans. I told myself it was just this once, that I needed to earn my place, but a pattern quickly emerged. My concept for a sustainable product line was deemed too ambitious in our meeting, only to appear in Nate's presentation to executives the following week, presented as his brainchild. My social media strategy for a struggling client doubled their engagement within days, yet Nate explained to the client that he had guided the team toward a more effective approach than initially proposed. Each time I created something valuable, Nate would find fault in front of others, then repurpose my work as his own, or attribute it to someone else. When I attempted to speak up, he'd interrupt with, "Team success over individual recognition, Tess. That's how we operate here." But it wasn't just me. I noticed how Olivia, once confident and outspoken, had grown hesitant to share ideas. Ben rarely spoke in meetings anymore. New designer Mia started strong, but within weeks was second-guessing every decision. 2 months in, I overheard Mia crying in the supply room. "I don't understand what I'm doing wrong," she whispered to Olivia. "He said my work was substandard, but last week he called the same approach innovative." That's just how it is with Nate, Olivia replied, her voice hollow. You're not crazy. Your work is good. That night, I couldn't sleep. Was I imagining things? Was I simply not as talented as I thought? The questions circled my mind like hungry wolves. The next morning, I arrived early to find Nate already in his office, door ajar. He was on a video call, unaware of my presence. The new designer has no idea what she's created. He laughed to someone on screen. The campaign concept will position us perfectly for the industry awards. Keep them desperate for validation, and they'll produce twice as much while accepting minimal recognition. I froze, breath caught in my throat. He was talking about my work for our biggest client, the one he'd criticized publicly before taking to the executive team as his own vision. The trick, he continued, is to keep them isolated. If they compare notes, the game's over. But people are surprisingly reluctant to admit when they feel inadequate. I retreated silently, my mind reeling with the confirmation of what I'd suspected but couldn't prove. This wasn't incompetent management. It was deliberate manipulation. Over the next weeks, I watched more carefully. Designers who questioned Nate found their projects suddenly disappointing clients. Quiet acceptance earned tiny raises despite brilliant contributions. 3 talented colleagues had quit before my arrival, crushed under constant negativity. 2 others had accepted lesser roles, believing themselves inadequate for the work they once excelled at. Nate had built his reputation by claiming others' creativity while methodically destroying their self-worth. The executives trusted only his assessment of our abilities, never seeing the true dynamics at play. I began documenting everything, saving emails, recording meetings with notification to all participants, keeping dated copies of my work before and after Nate's input. I wasn't sure what I'd do with the evidence, but I knew I needed to protect myself. Then came the industry showcase announcement. Each year, design teams presented their best work to leaders across the field. Nate predictably appointed himself to present our collective efforts. His crowning achievement would be taking credit for the entire department's transformation under his leadership. As the showcase approached, the pressure intensified. Nate became more critical, more demanding. Designers worked weekends without recognition. Mia resigned, citing personal reasons after a particularly brutal critique of work that a client had already approved enthusiastically. The morning of my performance review, I found an envelope on my desk. Inside was a single business card with a phone number and the words, "Former assistant, call if needed." I didn't have time to contemplate this mysterious message before Nate summoned me to the conference room, setting the stage for the conversation that began this story, the one where an unknown number warned me about being recorded. After signing the improvement plan under duress, I returned to my desk, mind churning with possibilities and fears. Who had sent that text? Why was Nate secretly recording me? And most importantly, what was I going to do about it? The business card seemed to burn in my pocket. With shaking fingers, I dialed the number. "I've been waiting for your call," a woman's voice answered. "My name is Dana. I was Nate's executive assistant for 3 years, and you're not the first person he's tried to destroy." The line crackled with Dana's steady breathing as I processed her words. I sat at my desk, hunched over my phone, keeping my voice low. "He records people?" I asked. "That's just one of his tactics," Dana replied. "Nate provokes negative comments about colleagues or pushes for admissions of imagined failings to use against you later. I watched him do it dozens of times, but I never had proof. Until now?" "Until you," she said. "Listen carefully. Nate destroys talented people systematically. First, he isolates them. Then, he erodes their confidence through constant criticism while simultaneously harvesting their best ideas. Finally, he creates a paper trail of performance issues before pushing them out or making them quit." My throat tightened. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're different. You're documenting things." I've heard whispers from Olivia. A pause. "And because I carry the guilt of staying silent for 3 years while watching careers crumble." I glanced toward Nate's office, where he was now laughing on a call, gesturing expansively. The same performance he'd given when I first interviewed. "What exactly does he want from this recording?" I asked. "He needs you to say something damaging about yourself or others. He'll edit it, present it to leadership as evidence of your negative attitude, and build his case for termination. Or worse, make you so miserable you quit, believing you're the problem. My fingers curled into a fist. That won't happen. Good. But be careful. Nate doesn't just take ideas. He takes spirits, souls. I've seen brilliant designers leave the industry altogether after believing his lies about their abilities. After we disconnected, I sat motionless, staring at the embossed business card. Dana had given me her private number, promising to share what she knew, but emphasized I needed to protect myself first. I looked up to see Olivia watching me, concern etched across her face. She approached cautiously. Bad review? She asked quietly. Apparently, I'm on thin ice, I replied, studying her reaction. Something flickered behind her eyes. Recognition, perhaps. Join me for lunch? Away from here? 20 minutes later, we sat in a small park 3 blocks from the office. Olivia unwrapped her sandwich but didn't eat. I shouldn't say anything, she began, picking at the bread crust. But watching what's happening to you, it's like seeing history repeat itself. With you? She nodded, eyes downcast. I was like you once. Ambitious, confident, full of ideas. Nate hired me personally, called me a rare talent. Her laugh held no humor. 6 months in, I couldn't make a design decision without second-guessing myself 20 times. What happened? The Clarion project. My concept won us the account, our biggest ever. During development, Nate criticized every element publicly, while privately sending my original designs to the client. At the launch party, he accepted an industry award for innovation, while I stood in the background, believing I'd contributed nothing of value. My heart sank. Why did you stay? By then, I believed no one else would hire me. She finally met my gaze. That's his real genius, Tess. He doesn't just steal your work. He convinces you it wasn't good in the first place. Back at the office, I found Ben waiting by my desk, nervously adjusting his glasses. Everything okay? I asked. Just checking about your portion of the showcase presentation, he said, louder than necessary. Then he slipped me a note before walking away. The paper read, Nate asked me to report back on your attitude after your review. Not the first time. Be careful. The web of manipulation extended further than I'd realized. Nate wasn't just pitting us against each other. He was creating a surveillance system where everyone felt compelled to monitor everyone else. That afternoon, I received an email requesting all my files for the showcase presentation for formatting consistency. The deadline was tomorrow, giving me no time to document changes between my original work and whatever would ultimately be presented. I forwarded the email to my personal account before replying that I'd deliver everything by morning. Then I worked late into the night, creating 2 versions. One for Nate and a secured backup of my original designs. The next morning, Nate called an emergency team meeting. His expression was grave as we assembled. I've just received concerning feedback from the showcase organizers, he announced. They've implemented new guidelines requiring all presentations to clearly attribute work to specific team members. The room remained silent, though I noticed several designers exchanging glances. This creates a logistical challenge, Nate continued, pacing slowly. But I've developed a solution. Each of you will prepare a brief summary of your contributions, which I'll incorporate. This will satisfy the requirement while maintaining our cohesive narrative. It was masterful. He'd found a way to appear transparent while controlling exactly how much credit each person received. When are these attributions due? I asked. By end of day, Nate replied. I'll need tonight to integrate everything before tomorrow's event. An impossible deadline, meaning he could edit our contributions however he wished, and no one would see the final presentation until it was live. As the meeting dispersed, my phone buzzed with a text from Dana. Need to talk. Found something. Cafe across street. 15 minutes. I made an excuse about needing supplies and slipped out. Dana was already waiting at a corner table, a leather portfolio beside her coffee. You're not the first person to document Nate's behavior, she said without preamble, but you might be the first with a chance to expose it. She slid a flash drive across the table. These are exit interviews from 8 designers who left in the past 2 years. Human Resources conducted them as standard procedure, but Nate convinced the director to mark them confidential. claiming disgruntled employees were making baseless accusations. "How did you get these?" I asked, not touching the drive. "I was responsible for filing HR documentation. I never deleted my copies." Her eyes darted to the window. "I was too afraid to use them while working there." But these stories, they're all the same. Designers describe watching their confidence and creativity systematically dismantled. This could help, but it's still their word against his. He would claim they were underperformers making excuses. Dana smiled thinly. "That's why I also included the original project files I could access, showing design work Nate claimed credit for alongside proof of who really created it." My heart raced. "This is exactly what I've been gathering." "There's more," Dana continued. "Last year's performance reviews compared to actual client feedback. Several instances where Nate told executives a project was struggling while telling clients the exact opposite. And 3 cases where he took designers' concepts, rejected them publicly, then presented them as his own solutions weeks later. I stared at the flash drive, now understanding its weight. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" Dana's expression clouded. "He threatened me." "Not directly. Nate's too smart for that. But he made it clear that speaking against him would end my career. He has powerful connections." She pushed the drive closer. "Use this however you need to. I'm leaving the industry anyway. I can't ask you to sacrifice. You didn't ask. I'm offering." She stood to leave. "One last thing. Check the files on Olivia's Clarion project." Nate didn't just take credit. He deliberately sabotaged her confidence because she was being considered for promotion above him. The executive emails tell the whole story. Back at the office, I found a message from Olivia asking to meet in the archive room. When I arrived, Ben was with her, along with Riley from the digital team. "We need to talk about tomorrow," Olivia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "About the showcase." "And about Nate," added Ben. Riley locked the door. "We know what he's doing to you because he did it to all of us." We stayed silent too long. For the next hour, they shared their stories. Ben had developed the user experience framework that won 3 design awards, all accepted by Nate. Riley had created the interactive platform that doubled client engagement, which Nate presented as his vision at last year's showcase. And Olivia. Olivia had lost a career-defining opportunity when Nate convinced executives she wasn't ready for advancement. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because you're fighting back," Ben said simply. "And we want to help." That night, I barely slept. The showcase loomed just hours away, with industry leaders and our entire executive team attending. It would be Nate's moment of triumph, unless someone stopped him. I arrived early, watching from a corner as the venue filled with designers, executives, and media representatives. Our company's display stood prominently at center stage, ready for Nate's presentation. He moved through the crowd confidently, shaking hands, laughing at just the right moments. Our team huddled nearby, nervous energy pulsing between us. Nate had sent the final presentation deck that morning, a masterpiece of subtle manipulation. Our contributions appeared technically credited but positioned as minor elements within his overarching vision. 10 minutes, everyone," called the event coordinator. Nate beckoned us closer. "Remember, this is about showcasing our collective achievement," he said, his expression earnest. "We rise together." As he turned away, Olivia squeezed my hand. "Are you sure about this?" she whispered. I nodded, feeling surprisingly calm. "Just be ready." The lights dimmed as Nate took the stage, welcomed by enthusiastic applause. The massive screen behind him illuminated with our company logo. "Today," he began, "I'm honored to present a body of work that represents the pinnacle of collaborative design thinking, a philosophy I've cultivated within our team over years of leadership." The first slide appeared, a stunning visualization of our combined projects, carefully arranged to suggest a single creative vision. His vision. "While you'll see individual contributions noted," he continued smoothly, "what's most remarkable is how these elements form a unified approach to client challenges, a methodology I've developed through years of industry experience." From my position at the back of the room, I caught the eye of our CEO, seated in the front row. She smiled approvingly at Nate, completely unaware of what was about to happen. Nate clicked to advance his presentation, but instead of his next carefully crafted slide, The screen changed to a video recording. Nate in his office, speaking candidly. The new designer has no idea what she's created. His recorded voice echoed through the hall. Keep them desperate for validation, and they'll produce twice as much while accepting minimal recognition. A gasp rippled through the audience. Nate froze mid-gesture, his expression shifting from confusion to horror as he recognized his own words. "What?" he began, frantically clicking his remote. The video continued, showing a series of clips. Nate taking credit for Olivia's Clarion concept in a private executive meeting. Nate dismissing Ben's framework publicly before presenting it as his own to clients. Nate instructing Dana to exclude Riley from a crucial presentation after using Riley's designs. Nate lunged toward the control booth, but security, alerted in advance about a potential technical disruption, blocked his path. "This is unauthorized," he shouted. "Someone is sabotaging." "Actually," I called, stepping forward from the back, "everything you're seeing is authorized and legally obtained." These are recordings from official meetings where multiple parties were notified of documentation, communications sent through company channels, and statements made in public office spaces. The audience turned toward me as I walked slowly down the center aisle, a tablet in my hands. "What you're witnessing isn't sabotage," I continued, my voice steadier than I felt. "It's truth. For years, this man has systematically claimed credit for others' creativity, while deliberately undermining their confidence and career advancement." Nate's face contorted with rage. "These clips are taken out of context. This is a vindictive attack by an employee facing performance issues." I reached the stage and turned to face the crowd. Is it vindictive when 8 different designers report identical experiences over 2 years? Is it taken out of context when performance reviews contradict client feedback? Is it one disgruntled employee when an entire design team has documentation? The screen behind us shifted to a grid of faces, former team members ready to testify to their experiences. Below each face appeared comparison images, their original designs alongside Nate's visionary concepts presented months later. Our CEO rose from her seat, expression unreadable. "Mr. Pike, is this accurate?" "Absolutely not," Nate sputtered. "This is a coordinated, because," she interrupted, "I'm looking at designs I personally complimented you on last quarter. Designs you specifically told me were your conceptual direction." The room had grown deathly quiet. Executives exchanged glances. Industry peers whispered among themselves. "If I may," I said, addressing the CEO directly, "there's something more important than exposing one person's deception." I tapped my tablet, and the screen changed again, this time displaying a beautiful mosaic of our team's work, each piece properly attributed to its creator. This is the true legacy of our design group. Not a single vision, but a tapestry of individual brilliance that deserves recognition. One by one, our team members stood. Olivia, Ben, Riley, even quiet Zoe from production. Together, we formed a line across the front of the room, a visual counterpoint to Nate's isolated position on stage. Security approached Nate as the CEO gestured toward the exit. His face drained of color as he realized what was happening. He made one last desperate attempt. "These people were nothing before I shaped them," he shouted. "Look at their work before me. Mediocre at best. I built their careers." The words hung in the air, damning in their arrogance. As Nate was escorted out, whispers erupted into conversations. Industry leaders approached our team members, examining the properly credited work with new appreciation. Our executives huddled urgently, occasionally glancing our way. The showcase continued without Nate, transformed into something unexpected, a celebration of individual contributions within collaborative frameworks. Our team, for the first time, stood proudly behind their work, accepting questions and compliments without deflection or doubt. But as the event concluded, uncertainty lingered beneath our triumph. We had exposed Nate, but at what cost to the company? To our own futures? Had we traded one form of career suicide for another? The CEO approached our group, her expression inscrutable. "I need all of you in the conference room tomorrow morning at 8, she said simply before walking away. That night, we gathered at a quiet bar, emotionally exhausted but unable to separate. We had tied our fates together in a way that couldn't be undone. What happens tomorrow? Ben asked, voicing everyone's fear. I looked around at these talented people who had risked everything to reclaim their worth. I don't know, I admitted. But whatever comes next, we face it honestly. Together. None of us could have predicted what awaited us in that conference room the next morning, or how completely our professional lives were about to transform. The next morning arrived with a weight of finality. Our team gathered in the hallway outside the conference room, exchanging nervous glances but few words. Whatever happened now, we had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. No regrets, Olivia whispered, squeezing my hand as the CEO's assistant waved us in. The room was already occupied. Our CEO, Valerie, sat at the head of the table. Beside her were the chief operating officer, the head of human resources, and two people I didn't recognize. The atmosphere felt heavy, formal. Please sit, Valerie said, gesturing to the empty chairs. We arranged ourselves along the table, a united front despite our anxiety. The room remained silent until everyone was settled. Valerie cleared her throat. Yesterday was unprecedented. In my 15 years leading this company, I've never witnessed anything like it. My chest tightened. Here it came. The corporate damage control. The need to protect the company's reputation over justice. Before we discuss consequences, Valerie continued, I want to address something directly. She leaned forward, making eye contact with each of us. I failed you. The statement hung in the air, unexpected and disarming. As CEO, creating a workplace where talent thrives is my responsibility. Somehow, I allowed a culture where one person could systematically undermine others while ascending through deception. She turned to one of the strangers, a woman with silver-streaked hair and keen eyes. This is Audrey Lane, an independent investigator specializing in workplace ethics. Last night, after reviewing initial evidence, I asked her to examine everything thoroughly. Audrey? The investigator opened a sleek laptop. The documentation provided is extensive and damning. Email trails, recorded meetings, comparative design files, exit interviews. They form a clear pattern of creative theft and psychological manipulation spanning 3 years. Valerie nodded grimly. And the legal implications? The second stranger, a sharp-featured man in a charcoal suit, spoke up. I'm Patrick Welsh, outside counsel. While the company faces potential liability for allowing this situation to develop, the individuals who came forward acted within legal boundaries. Their documentation methods were appropriate, and the public revelation occurred in a professional context relevant to the misconduct. Valerie absorbed this information before addressing us again. Here's where we stand. Nate Pike's employment has been terminated, effective immediately. His final paycheck will reflect no bonus or outstanding commissions. Security has already cleared his office. A ripple of tension released across our side of the table. Not celebration, exactly, but vindication. But removing one person doesn't solve a systemic problem, Valerie continued. Which brings us to restructuring. My stomach dropped. Restructuring usually meant layoffs. Our design division requires new leadership, transparent, collaborative, and ethical. Someone who values individual contribution within team success. She paused, her gaze settling on our group. Olivia, your portfolio from the past 5 years is exceptional. Would you consider stepping into a director role? Olivia's sharp intake of breath was audible. Yes, absolutely. Good. You'll work directly with me during transition. Valerie turned to Ben. Your UX framework has apparently been foundational to our digital success. I'd like you to head a new specialized UX department, reporting to Olivia but with dedicated resources. Ben's eyes widened behind his glasses as he nodded wordlessly. Riley, your interactive designs have driven significant client engagement. You'll lead client-facing technology integration, also under Olivia. As Valerie continued assigning new roles based on previously unrecognized talents, I realized we weren't being punished. We were being repositioned according to our actual abilities. Finally, she turned to me. Tess, you've been here only 6 months, yet you catalyzed a necessary reckoning. Your design work shows innovation, but your leadership in this situation demonstrates something equally valuable: integrity and strategic thinking. She slid a folder across the table. This is a new position, Ethics and Creative Advocacy Director. You would develop protocols ensuring proper attribution of creative work, facilitate transparent communication between leadership and creators, and build safeguards against the dynamics that allowed this situation to develop. I opened the folder to find a job description with a salary nearly double my current compensation. Why me? I asked, genuinely puzzled. I'm the newest, the least invested. Perhaps that's precisely why you could see what others had normalized, Valerie replied. Sometimes the clearest perspective comes from fresh eyes. The meeting continued for another hour as we discussed practical implementation, timelines, and support systems for team members still processing their experiences. By the time we adjourned, the design division had been completely reorganized, not dismantled, but reborn. As we filed out, Valerie asked me to stay behind. There's one more thing, she said after the others left. How did you access those recordings of Nate, particularly the ones from private executive meetings? The question I'd been dreading. I took a deep breath. I can explain. No need, she interrupted with a faint smile. I already know. I just wanted to see if you'd be honest. My confusion must have shown on my face. Dana contacted me directly last night, Valerie explained. She was quite thorough in explaining her role in preserving evidence. She also mentioned your careful approach to gathering only legally defensible documentation. Relief washed through me. I wasn't sure you'd believe us without irrefutable proof. That's the tragedy of situations like this, Valerie said quietly. When someone is skilled at manipulation, they don't just damage individuals, they erode trust throughout an organization. Rebuilding that is your first priority in your new role. Over the next few weeks, our design division underwent a transformation that went beyond organizational charts. Under Olivia's leadership, we implemented a collaborative attribution system, ensuring every contributor received proper credit. Ben's UX department flourished with clear guidelines for integrated workflows. Riley revolutionized our client presentation approach to highlight team contributions. The most profound change, however, was atmospheric. Designers who had grown accustomed to hiding their best ideas now shared them eagerly. Meetings became energetic exchanges rather than tense evaluations. People stayed late, not from fear, but from genuine engagement with their projects. 3 months after Nate's departure, we gathered for the quarterly design review. The room buzzed with conversation as designers displayed their latest work alongside their names, a simple change with powerful impact. I never thought I'd enjoy these again, Olivia commented as we prepared to start. Remember how we used to dread Nate's constructive feedback? I used to get physically ill the night before, Ben admitted. Now I actually sleep. Riley joined us, tablet in hand. You won't believe this. 3 former designers have applied to return. People who left because of Nate, including Mia, I asked. She's first on the list, says she's been following our recent campaigns and wants to be part of what we're building. As the review began, I watched my colleagues present their work with confidence, accepting genuine feedback without defensiveness. The creative output had not just maintained quality without Nate. It had surpassed previous standards as liberated minds explored new possibilities. Afterward, Olivia pulled me aside. There's something you should see. She led me to her office, where Dana waited with an envelope. What's this about? I asked. Dana smiled. A real smile. Nothing like the tense expression I remembered from our cafe meeting. I've been tracking industry responses to Nate's departure. Thought you should know what's happening. Inside the envelope was a printout of a job rejection email addressed to Nate Pike from a prominent design agency. The message was tactfully worded but clear. While your portfolio demonstrates technical skill, we've received concerning feedback regarding attribution and management practices. Our culture prioritizes collaborative development and transparent credit allocation. This is the 5th rejection, Dana explained. Word has spread, not through gossip but through proper channels, HR networks, professional associations. He's finding that reputation matters more than his portfolio. I don't want revenge, I said, feeling uncomfortable. I just wanted the manipulation to stop. This isn't revenge, Olivia countered. It's consequence. There's a difference. She was right. What happened to Nate wasn't about punishment but accountability, something long overdue. That evening, After most had left for the day, I found Ben still working in the creative lab, immersed in a complex wireframe. "Can I ask you something personal?" I said, pulling up a chair. He looked up, adjusting his glasses. "Sure. How are you doing, really? After everything with Nate?" Ben's hands stilled on the keyboard. "Honestly, I'm still processing. For 2 years, I believed I wasn't good enough. That voice becomes part of you, you know? Sometimes I still hear it. I know exactly what you mean. But then I remember the showcase," he continued, a small smile forming. "That moment when everyone saw the truth. It wasn't just about exposing Nate. It was about reclaiming who we are as creators." His words captured something essential that had been difficult to articulate. The showcase hadn't just been about justice, but about restoration. 6 months after Nate's departure, our team received an industry nomination for innovative organizational structure, recognizing our attribution system and collaborative approach. The irony wasn't lost on any of us that the very showcase where we'd exposed Nate had led to this recognition. The night before the award ceremony, I stayed late finalizing our presentation. As I gathered my things to leave, I found Valerie standing in my office doorway. "Working late again?" she asked. "Just wrapping up. Tomorrow's a big day." She entered, closing the door behind her. "I never properly thanked you, Tess." "For what?" "For seeing what I missed. For having the courage to act on it." She sat down across from me. "Do you know what haunts me most? I promoted Nate 3 times. I believed his narratives about difficult team members. I accepted his appropriation of others' ideas because the results seemed positive. He was very convincing," I offered. "That's no excuse. Leaders must look deeper." She sighed. The day of the showcase, when those recordings played, I recognized client presentations I'd personally praised him for, work I'd used to justify his advancement. The weight of her responsibility was evident in her expression. "The thing is," I said carefully, "none of us saw it clearly at first, not even me. It took time to recognize the pattern, to gather evidence, to find allies who could confirm what I was experiencing." "That's why your new department matters," Valerie replied. "Systems that depend on individual heroism to correct injustice are fundamentally flawed." The next day, as our team accepted the industry award, I looked out at the audience, the same venue where we'd confronted Nate 6 months earlier. The symmetry felt appropriate somehow. Later, at the celebration dinner, Olivia raised her glass. "To Tess, who risked everything to fight for truth." I shook my head. "That's not quite right. I didn't plan some grand crusade. I just couldn't accept what was happening." "That's what makes it remarkable," Riley said. "You didn't set out for revenge or glory. You just refused to participate in your own diminishment." As conversations flowed around me, I reflected on how we'd arrived at this moment. The truth was, there had been no master plan when I first sensed Nate's manipulation. No elaborate scheme for exposure or justice, just a simple, fundamental decision. I would not allow my work to be stolen. I would not accept being made to feel smaller than I was, and I would not stand by while it happened to others. The revenge, if it could be called that, had never been about Nate's downfall. It had been about reclaiming what he'd taken. Our work, our confidence, our professional identities, about creating systems that made such theft impossible in the future. The most powerful moment hadn't been watching Nate escorted from the showcase in disgrace. It had been the weeks and months that followed, watching designers rediscover their voices, seeing Ben present his framework without apologizing for its existence, hearing Riley confidently defend a creative choice, witnessing Olivia step into leadership with natural authority she'd always possessed but learned to doubt. And perhaps most meaningful, welcoming back those who had left, like Mia, who now led our Emerging Designers program, with enthusiasm that had once been extinguished. This was the true victory. Not that one man had fallen, but that many had risen. After dinner, as we gathered for a team photo, I noticed Dana watching from nearby. I waved her over. "You belong in this picture too," I insisted. "None of this would have happened without you." She hesitated. "I just provided information. You had the courage to use it." "That's not true," I countered. "You kept those records for years, knowing someday they might matter. You reached out when you saw history repeating. That wasn't just information. It was hope." As the photographer positioned us, I found myself surrounded by people who had transformed from colleagues to something closer to family, people who had shared a difficult journey and emerged stronger. The camera flashed, capturing a moment of genuine joy, not the artificial enthusiasm Nate had demanded, but the authentic happiness of people doing work they loved and receiving proper recognition for it. Later that night, alone in my apartment, I opened my laptop to find an email from an unfamiliar address. The subject line read simply, "Thank you." It was from a designer at another company, someone I'd never met. They described watching our showcase confrontation and recognizing their own situation with a manager who claimed credit for others' work. Inspired by our example, they had documented the pattern and presented evidence to their leadership. Changes were now underway. "You showed me it was possible to stand up without being destroyed," they wrote. "That speaking truth doesn't have to end a career. It can transform it." As I read similar messages that had arrived over months, from designers, writers, developers, people across creative industries, I understood something profound. Stories like ours rarely remain isolated. They ripple outward, giving others permission to demand better, to insist on fairness, to believe their work and well-being matter. That was the ultimate revenge against systems that depended on silence and isolation to survive, breaking that silence together. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these important stories reach others who might be experiencing similar situations. Share in the comments if you've ever had to stand up for yourself at work. You never know who might draw strength from your experience. Remember, sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply refuse to participate in our own diminishment.